We'll start this episode with a quote by Peter Drucker: "What gets measured gets managed." Throughout this season, we have built a household financial operating system. We began with the cash flow statement. We learned how money moves through the household. We learned how to measure liquidity. We learned how to evaluate leverage. We learned how to forecast future outcomes. We learned how to determine whether future obligations are adequately funded. And we learned how income resilience affects the durability of the entire structure. But there is one final problem. A number by itself means very little. Suppose I tell you that a household has a liquidity runway of 6 months. Is that good? Suppose I tell you that a household has a recurring surplus ratio of 15%. Is that good? Suppose I tell you that a household has a funding adequacy ratio of 0.8. Should that be something of concern? Without context, measurements are simply numbers. Benchmarking transforms measurements into insight. So in this video, we're going to review the 6 dimensions of optionality, establish benchmark ranges, construct an overall optionality score, and learn how to identify the structural weaknesses that deserve the most attention. Before we benchmark performance, let's briefly review each dimension. Dimension 1, recurring surplus. Recurring surplus measures how efficiently the household converts income into surplus before financing charges. The formula is net income before financing charges divided by income. And that net income before financing charges is found from the contribution income statement. This dimension represents the fuel source of the system. Without recurring surplus, liquidity cannot grow, future obligations cannot be funded, optionality deteriorates. Dimension 2, liquidity runway. Liquidity runway measures how long the household can survive if income suddenly disappears. The formula is liquid assets divided by monthly fixed obligations. Liquidity buys time, and time creates options. Remember that those monthly fixed obligations are the fixed obligations minus the variable costs that you can remove completely. Dimension 3, fixed cost rigidity. Fixed cost rigidity measures how much income is required to maintain the existing lifestyle. The formula is fixed lifestyle expenses divided by income. The higher the ratio, the less adaptable the household becomes. Dimension 4, leverage pressure. Leverage pressure measures the burden imposed by financing decisions. The formula is financing charges divided by income. Recall that the financing charges include interest expenses and rent if rent is the situation. Debt creates obligations. Obligations reduce flexibility. Dimension 5, funding adequacy. Funding adequacy measures whether future obligations are being funded according to schedule. The formula is funding progress divided by expected progress, where the funding progress is the current fund balance divided by the target fund balance, and then the expected progress is the time elapsed divided by the total time horizon. A ratio above 1 indicates the household is ahead of schedule. A ratio below 1 indicates the household is behind schedule. Dimension 6, income resilience. Income resilience measures the durability of future income generation. Factors include diversification, stability, transferability, concentration risk, volatility. Income is the engine that powers every other dimension. Now that we understand what each dimension measures, we need to establish benchmark ranges. For recurring surplus, if we have a ratio above 40%, this would be considered excellent, 25 to 40 strong, 10 to 25 adequate, 0 to 10 weak, and below 0 critical. Higher is better. For liquidity runway, we could have 12 months as a rating excellent, between 6 and 12 strong, between 3 to 6 adequate, between 1 to 3 weak, and less than 1 critical. Higher again is better. For the fixed cost rigidity, a ratio below 20% could be excellent, 20 to 35 strong, 35 to 50 adequate, 50 to 65 weak, and above 65 critical. For fixed cost rigidity, lower is better. For leverage pressure, we could have a ratio below 5%, which is excellent, 5 to 10, strong, 10 to 15, adequate, 15 to 25, weak, and above 25% critical. Again, in this case, lower is better. For the funding ratio, or the funding adequacy ratio, above 1.2 would be rated excellent, 1 to 1.2 strong, 0.8 to 1 adequate, 0.6 to 0.8 weak, and below 0.6 critical. For funding adequacy, higher is better. Lastly, for income resilience, we could have a score of 90 to 100, which is excellent, 75 to 90 strong, 60 to 75 adequate, 40 to 60 weak, below 40 critical. Again, in this case, higher is better. Not all dimensions contribute equally. Some dimensions are foundational, others are downstream consequences. We will use the following weighting framework. So for the recurring surplus, we'll weight that 25%. For income resilience, 20%. For liquidity runway, 20%. For funding adequacy, 15%. For fixed cost rigidity, 10%. And for leverage pressure, 10%. Now you may ask why these ratios. And the reason is because surplus generation, resilient income, and liquidity are the primary drivers of optionality. Everything else becomes easier when those foundations are strong. The optionality score is calculated as the recurring surplus ratio times 25%, income resilience times 20%, liquidity runway times 20%, funding adequacy times 15%, fixed cost rigidity times 10%, and leverage pressure times 10%. Let's see how different households can arrive at very different optionality outcomes. Household A we'll call the high earner. Strong income, strong recurring surplus, weak liquidity, weak funding adequacy, optionality score 68. The diagnosis here, great income, weak financial architecture. The focus is to build liquidity and increase future funding. Household B we'll call the debt-heavy professional. Strong income, high leverage pressure, high fixed cost rigidity, optionality score 62. The diagnosis here, strong earnings trapped by obligations. The focus, reduce financing costs and improve flexibility. For household C, we'll call them the resilient planner. Moderate income, strong liquidity, strong funding adequacy, strong income resilience, optionality score 88. The diagnosis here, not the highest earner, highest optionality. The focus is to maintain the system. Household D, the entrepreneur. Excellent surplus, excellent income resilience, weak liquidity. They'll get an optionality score of, say, 72. The diagnosis here, strong long-term potential, vulnerable to short-term shocks. The focus is to increase liquidity runway. Many people focus on their strengths, but systems are often constrained by their weakest component. A household may have excellent income, excellent surplus, excellent funding adequacy, yet possess almost no liquidity. Another household may have excellent liquidity, excellent income resilience, yet remain severely underfunded for retirement. Optionality is rarely determined by the strongest dimension. It is often constrained by the weakest. The goal is not perfection, the goal is balance. Strong systems are balanced systems. Throughout this season, we have learned that wealth is not simply income. Wealth is not simply net worth. Wealth is not simply lifestyle. Wealth is the ability to preserve future freedom of action. Strong households generate surplus, they maintain liquidity, they avoid excessive rigidity, they control leverage, and they fund future obligations. They also build resilient income streams. Together, these dimensions create optionality, and optionality determines how many future paths remain available when uncertainty arrives. In Season 4, we will move beyond measuring optionality. We will begin using optionality to make better decisions regarding capital allocation, opportunity cost, discount rates, future forecasting, and strategic financial planning. Because ultimately, the future does not belong to the household with the highest income. It belongs to the household with the greatest freedom to choose.